1, but there you go. You're good to go.
And there we are. Hey, sideliners, welcome back. I am back. It's your boy Josh, finally back on the podcast after a long hiatus. Appreciate being MIA like the Lakers game for a couple of years, and I'm glad to be back on board. Finally, not hosting this time. Sliding on back into the podcast like your DMs. And then we got Mr. Air Canada coming and helping us out on the show over here. That's what we should rename. Yeah.
All right, Mr. Air Canada is what we'll stick with here. Although the Air Canada Center's been rocking the past couple of weeks. So, I mean, we can stick with that. And
stick with it for as long as they're winning, right?
Well, I don't know how my boys are going to fare by the end of tonight, but they're looking not bad.
Don't sound like a fickle Miami fan. We know how those guys can be.
Oh, it's all LeBron today. It's nothing else out there.
So what do we got on deck for today?
We want to take a look at Clips. Are they our usual Clippers? I mean, they're 10-1 right now, but are they gonna finish where they usually do and do what we expect out of the Clippers, which is get thrown out of the playoffs by some rowdy number 8 seed or Houston for whatever reason? Taking a look at young T-Wolves, young Lakers, your young Lakers that are finally showing some talent with all that skill they've been building up. I think we should talk process in Philadelphia, which the process is one man, one big Jahlil Okafor, and then we can finish off with some trade talk here. DeMarcus on the blocks, and then I think we'll take a flash at the ringer today, just looking at what's a real legitimate trade talk and what's, Klay Thompson's on the block because I said so. But let's start Clippers. What do you think? 10-1? Are they legit finally, or are they just what they normally are?
The 10-1 Clippers is a reflection of two things. The Clippers being a very consistently good team during the season. There's never really been a doubt as whether the Clippers can contend. You're definitely going to get – the Clippers are an upper echelon team in the West Coast. There's no doubt about it. And this is coming from a Lakers fan. I'm sorry, but these guys are veterans. They know how to win. They've had their core, Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan, for a long time now. And their wingmen have come along and helped out, whether it's a veteran swingman or just a nice backup point guard. I mean, they've had Jamal Crawford in a 6-man for the last 5 or 6 years. And so I think it's kind of hard to imagine that this 10-1 start is sort of a fluke. But other side, I mean, if you look at the 11 games that they've played, the one loss that they've had is against the Oklahoma City Thunder, manned by the man, the myth, the legend, which is Russell Westbrook. Of course, they have had key wins against the Spurs, which in prior years they've lost against basically veteran leadership, which has outplayed their athleticism. They came back and beat the Thunder again by a very close margin. So you're looking at a win and a loss, both by a total of 2 points. So they're basically pushing there. But then the rest of their wins have come against teams like the Grizzlies, who we know was just one bad break, no pun intended, from being done for the entire season. Against the Suns, who are still trying to find whatever image they're trying to project after giving away the Morris twins for pennies on the dollar. The Jazz, who have always been young, had never really had that consistency at the head coach. They won against the Trailblazers twice. That's saying a lot, but again, that's another young team. So I think that also their record is a very deep reflection of their current schedule. Now, if we're expecting them to falter, then it's probably not going to be until the middle of the season when injury starts coming into play. About trade deadlines, and teams are starting to get more used to playing against the athleticism of the Clippers. The hope is that you don't see Blake Griffin sidelined with elbow injuries for weeks on end, or Chris Paul gets sidelined with knee injuries or ankle injuries or any type of lower body, because this is a team that's also playing on its last legs as far as being at the peak of their competition.
Yeah, for sure. So one thing I want to mention there is you said consistency, and I think the consistency never really relies in their starters because we know Blake Griffin's going to have an off night. We know DeAndre Jordan can't really do anything but dunk the basketball and rebound. But I think it's been guys like Crawford, like Spates. I think it's been the bench more than anybody that's really sparked the Clippers to something. Do you think there's something in their bench there that's going to carry them, or is it just going to be usual Clippers bench that's going to give off in the postseason and they're going to rely on CP3?
Here's what I think when I say consistency. I think they're and I do have to somewhat give it to the starters. That's where we may split a little bit. And the reason why I give it to the starters is not so much of their overall play; it's how they initialize the game. It's how they start out the game. When the leaders set the pace, the bench follows suit. I mean, are we going to ask Austin Rivers to start the game when he was, playing with them? Do we expect him to start a game and set that same type of pace that Chris Paul may set? No.
I mean, he's definitely going to come. Doc, I think Doc might agree. It doesn't really matter how he plays. He's going to get in the game either way.
This is true. No, let my boy play.
Especially with Daddy's coach.
That's still the very interesting dynamic. I was hoping to see Kobe Carl be a player coached by his dad, but of course that never really worked out. And Kobe now is I think he's the head coach of the LA Defenders.
Oh, we'll see Kobe in the big leagues again soon enough, as soon as he's ready.
But nonetheless, I really think that overall, I mean, yeah, you can definitely say that the bench it plays consistently when they get into the game, but they fall into they're like dominoes. As long as that first domino is knocked over from the starters, then everything else falls into place after that. So, yeah, definitely very consistent play, not giving up huge leads, keeping tight on the defense. Yeah, it's great to see them starting out the beginning of the season. I think that they can carry this out to a pretty decent record to a 2 or 3 seed. We actually called this before the season started that the Clippers are good. It's just a question of whether they can finish it out in the playoffs.
Yeah, no doubt. I think the Clippers have always been good, and if they can carry it up, that'll be interesting in the West. Let's stay in the West with a team that you've loved and have probably hated for past seasons, for the past couple. What do you think of the young Lakers here?
What do I think of the young Lakers? I think that the young Lakers are they got a great focus. They're starting to play with a lot less fear. And when I say fear, I don't mean fear of the game itself or fear of coming on stage. I think it's they play with a lot less fear of executing a play. They're definitely a lot more sure of where the ball is going now. You can see a lot of those backdoor cuts really working. Passes that were kind of there before from D'Angelo Russell and Jordan Clarkson. They've been there, but they were a little slow on the zip, and now they're just so consistent. And it's fun to see Mozgov running the floor again like he was fresh out of Denver.
Which we have not seen in quite some time out of Mr. Mozgov. Well, everything you just said there about play style, about not being afraid, we can probably mirror that into the Timberwolves team. In terms of process, who do you think is going to develop into the better team, or do you think it's really even to this point and it's going to stay even until we really see one of them actually develop?
It's going to be kind of hard to put a finger on that because you're looking at a Lakers squad who was basically hampered by talent and coaching for the last few years. So we haven't really got to see each player play at their best at whatever position that they could be at. Now we're seeing Brandon Ingram run the floor, which is probably really pissing some teams off, is trying to defend this really lanky guy that can handle the ball. Julius Randle, who can actually storm up and down the floor, has been handling the ball. Luke Walton's been basically throwing some bigger guys at handling the ball, and so if that's been their capability, no other coach has allowed them to do that. Yeah, you've seen flashes of it, but it's been more of, all right, give Kobe the ball as long as he's healthy. You're looking at the
Yeah,
Timberwolves.
so you said running the floor there and handling the ball, and
Mm-hmm.
handling the ball is going to go hand in hand with Andrew Wiggins absolutely handling his Wolves right now. So what do you think of Andrew
Okay,
Wiggins just going off? So my man
now
north of the border taking
and now
some Air Canada flights up and above the
here's
rim.
here's the best part about the Timberwolves is that they have been good when healthy. Period. Their biggest problem has always been health, and now in for some of these players, it's like their third or fourth year. It's great to see this finally come together. I think it's a push right now. It's going to come down to whether they can consistently create wins towards the end of the season when their legs are getting tired after they ran their legs out. Um, we have a little bit more expectation for the Timberwolves now because they've had great coaching and they know how to execute. It's just been always been a question of health.
Yeah, no, for sure it has been, and Sam Mitchell has never been doubted as a coach. I don't think, at least in Minnesota, maybe here in Toronto early on. But then again, they can doubt Jay Triano, so you can't really get a coach up here without throwing shade at him. But do you think the young core can stick together in Minnesota and maybe with the Lakers, or do they have to move some of their pieces to really fit it in and bring in some veteran skill?
When it comes to both teams, I think that they're just fine where they're at. I think both teams need to continue to just try to grow together. One of the things that we fail to see in the NBA is consistency with their teams. Yeah, you may move one or two bench guys, bring in a couple of role players over, but I don't think that it's so much more of an issue of them being able to score now. It's just being able to maintain a defensive strategy down the stretch, getting guys on the floor that maybe can give up a couple of fouls, make some key steals here and there, and support Andrew Wiggins. My God, 43. I
The
don't
man
know.
was a beast.
I don't know who reminded this guy that he was the number one overall pick a few years ago.
Maybe it was Greg Oden.
It was possible that it was him, but if I were Cleveland right now, being David Blatt, I kind of like kick myself in the behind, thinking that we could have had that. We could have had that.
Well,
For LeBron.
speaking of Cleveland, what do you think of the three-point shooting threat they're trying to deliver right now? Is that a Cleveland style that can stick around, or is that something they're just trying to do to stall until they get to crunch time when they hand the
Mm.
ball to big number six?
Anyone remember a team about 2 years ago that had this huge onslaught of three-pointer shot during the whole season? Kind of came up with the championship, then tried it again the following season and came up short by a three-pointer on the championship. Hey, you live by the three, you die by the three. All I'm saying is as long as they can keep up their interior scoring with Grandpa Kyrie showing off his slash and dash skills, being able to penetrate, and LeBron James's sheer domination of the paint, I think that's when the three ball starts to work. It gives guys time to set up and make a natural jump shot versus being contested. Can they keep this up? Again, can they keep this up? I think maybe. Will it help them down the stretch? I don't think that the three ball is going to be the key point of them. I think it's always going to be their defense.
No, for sure. The three-point is not what makes the Cleveland Cavaliers a good team. What makes them so dangerous is a chase down block that wins you championships. Um, let's rewind a little bit. You said youth. Now, speaking of youth, that's something that while the Lakers have, and so do the Timberwolves, the Sacramento Kings do not. And so, for probably the third season, or maybe actually every season he's been there, DeMarcus Cousins has been a trade rumor, although not one of those stale rumors. I think Boogie's on the move this year. If he was to go somewhere, where do you think that is?
My biggest if the money were still on the table, I put him in Memphis.
Yeah, so what do you think Memphis gives up though in terms of like Sacramento obviously needs picks and they need some short-term contract money so that they can sign a free agent, which I'm assuming is going to be their game plan, as developing youth has not gone their way in the past couple of years. In terms of just youth and picks, who do you think they could look to try and answer that?
Well, I guess the first thing you'd have to think of is how well can we screw Sacramento out of a deal, out of what they want. And Sacramento, I have no idea what their identity is right now.
No,
Um,
I don't even think they have a clue, which is the problem.
if you ever said trade with Sacramento, everyone knows that Boogie is the player that you want because he is just a sheer threat. But it's a big question mark after that, and you don't know what you should give to them or offer on the table because they could ask for something completely random. Yes, it may be. I mean, the biggest thing right now is going to be future picks because they have needed to build from the ground up since they got Boogie Cousins. So I'm just gonna say, and I don't know. I don't know what Memphis would give up. They put up so much money on the table already for signing all their other players that there's much wiggle room other than future picks because that's the way that this team is heading right now.
Now, this was an interesting thing thrown out by obviously Bob McCowan, who's a Toronto sportscaster. But do you think Boogie could land north of the border for guy like Siakam or Pirtle, and then a couple Toronto picks here, maybe even DeLon Wright?
Well, at this point, yes, because Sacramento has essentially, well, Sacramento has put Boogie on the table and has been waiting for someone like Kobe Bryant to be offered on the table. Like they would do a 1-to-1 trade for any type of star, but I think people are starting to call their bluff, and
Yeah, no
the
doubt.
they're starting that trade value is starting to diminish just because of the number of times he's been put on the table. Um, that as an idea, would he be with what he wants, which is a playoff contender? Yes. Would he be comfortable in that offense? I'm not sure. Because I think that in order for Toronto to accept Boogie on their team, they would need to show that they can score consistently down the stretch, and not just score down the stretch, but have someone to successfully back Boogie up because he'd have to be a starter.
For sure, and that would mean somebody like JV would have to go to the bench, which would mean big time money wasted. But I think even to land DeMarcus, you basically have to give up somebody who was big money. I think a potential landing spot for him is a place like Dallas, who just blew a whole bunch of money on Harrison Barnes there, and they've just been
That was
horrific.
yes, yes. That's actually that would be the most this makes sense move, considering that Dirk's on his last legs. Mark Cuban,
Yeah, and I think Cuban's always smart. He's always moving. I think if he gave the GM the okay to give up some future for some Boogie now and try to build him up, that would be something he would be totally up for.
because Dallas's biggest
Uh,
problem is that they just have holes in our offense, and I think that Boogie would help two ways for that for sure. Um, and maybe who knows? Maybe they trade some of those contracts that those new contracts that they signed. Maybe they don't have to stick to them. I'm not sure if there was a no trade clause in a couple of those contracts, but I could see him moving some players really quick.
yeah, so if we keep on the trade block here, is there anybody else that you think that has a legitimate chance of getting moved? And I mean, in terms of big term pieces, not your side classic Luke Ridnour's going here, there, and everywhere this offseason, but the guys
um,
like the Clay Thompson rumors and stuff like that is just the Golden State guys trying to get some buzz going around the team. Obviously, Clay's not going anywhere, but is there other big names you think that might have a look on them?
well, we spoke of this youth team earlier. Jordan Clarkson was on the was in the trade rumors for a while, and he's definitely one of those pieces that has developed a lot more so over the last 2 years, and it's definitely looking like if he doesn't, if this offense doesn't turn the team into a playoff contender, he could definitely see himself playing a bigger role on a different team pretty soon.
Now,
That's maybe.
do you think the Clippers is one of those teams there? Because you said again they're kind of on the last straw here for Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, the classic core doesn't produce, do they try and give something up and try and get a head start on the rebuild process?
They could use some 3-point shooting. Some
Other
more
than Jamal Crawford.
other than Jamal Crawford or JJ Redick. I don't know if Redick's still there, but though, I mean, it would be good to have some. I mean, Clarkson is getting way better at his 3-point shooting, so I think that with the way that the West is turning out with a bunch of 3-point shooting teams, he would be a great asset to that team should they want to keep Doc on board and try to continue to keep up offensively with the West.
Which would be the smart play, I think, for them at this point in time. But you never know with the Clippers. In the East, do you think there's any big names on the board that are going to change anything or really, really alter the East in any look here? Chicago, New York?
It would be nice for either Joel Embiid or Jahlil Okafor to be traded from Philadelphia just to save what could be the end of their career. Just to be nice for one of them to get out of that really big backlog of rotation of centers and power forwards there, and just to get one of those guys to a team where they can sit, develop a little bit, and get onto a better contending team. I wouldn't trade within conference, but Philadelphia to Detroit, maybe.
Philadelphia to Detroit sounds like a deal that could swing profitable for both sides.
Detroit's one of those quiet teams that they make noise. They mess up the records of other teams. They're not necessarily one of those teams that you're like, oh, what is Detroit going to do this year? It's, oh, who's going to get messed up when they go to Detroit? And it will be nice just to see Detroit do a little bit better than last year with some better key pieces. And I think that team's always been about grit and hard work. Okafor would be
which would reflect their last championship with a team of just grinders, and even the dynasty before that and the Bad Boys. I guess Detroit is really just the grinder city, is it not?
Motor City, throw it up. 313.
So, I mean, we can stay in the East here or stay in the West. What do you think of injuries so far, if we can hit that up quickly? We've seen some guys go down. So we've seen, sadly for the Hawks, Al Horford go out pretty quickly. We've seen the Raptors lose Valanciunas, Sullinger before the season. In the West, we saw Mike Conley have to sit early, and we've seen Marc Gasol have to sit early, which, I mean, for Memphis isn't really a new thing. But do you think injuries, if they're going to shape one team this season, what team loses the most just because injuries kind of rack them up?
Okay, so I looked at that two ways. That's a great question. All right, first of all, Atlanta's injury is just the curse of Howard. So,
Dwight's bringing his injury shame out there.
Yeah, that's kind of what you get. But you have to look at it as value of the player contract wise, and then possibility of injury to like impact ratios for that. So if there were a team that was going to get severely damaged by an injury right now, would be, of course, the Clippers is going to be top on that list. A lot of high caliber players with expiring contracts. But each of those starters has a high win share attributed to their team. So any one of I would say the starting three, the big three, Paul, Jordan, or Griffin would then show a reflection in their record. I think that was why their record ended up the way it did last year. On the flip side, if you look in the East, if any person gets injured in Chicago, I think that's a huge – I mean, they're already lacking in offense. They're trying to share the ball as it is anyway, and they're needing Wade to go off for like 30 a game in order to get develop wins. So if either Butler or Wade get injured, then that's going to turn that team from a possible 6th through 8th team into a lottery team immediately. And then you have to look at those who are. Then you have to look at the expectation factor. So those are the two teams with just the value factor and just expectation factor. If anyone gets injured in the starting lineup in Golden State, actually, I'll take that back. I think if anyone in Cleveland gets injured, it'll be worse for them than it would be for Golden State,
which I
simply
believe
because
100%. Because
because
I mean, yeah, no, just building on your Cleveland versus Golden State point here. Um, Draymond, we've seen really cut down his production per se, but maybe
Mhm,
that's attributed to his minutes. So in
mhm,
Cleveland, if you think one person were to go down that is not LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, or Kevin Love, who do you think has the most
mhm.
profound impact that's not their big three if they lose
Irving,
somebody to injury?
Irving, there's no question about it. I mean, you see the impact that he has on the floor immediately with or without LeBron James. Kyrie Irving is the best player on the floor. Period.
At any given
Like
time?
I mean,
Yeah.
you have to account for LeBron James at all times. I mean, you wish that you could put six guys on the court so that way you can have two of them guard LeBron James. I totally understand that. But when healthy, actually even not at 100%, Kyrie Irving is still a threat.
No doubt he's a threat. Let's kind of switch up here. Um, the college basketball season in the States just started, and we saw a
Mm-hmm.
couple big games here. I
Mm-hmm.
think just wrapping up, we had Kentucky blow out Michigan State, which I thought
Mm-hmm.
was a big one because, I mean, when have we seen Kentucky not be good? I think the answer is probably never. You might be able to find a year that they weren't just absolutely dominant. And then earlier in the day, we had Baylor blowing up there. Out of schools in the States, who do you think this year is the team to watch? Maybe not just because they're gonna go off and kill everybody, but just to watch because they're gonna have some real skill to them.
I honestly think it's too early to tell. Right now, you're looking at a few non-conference games with your top 25 playing out of conference, minus the possible upcoming game with Duke versus Kansas. But um, non-conference games, you got guys a lot of preseason games going on right now. Arizona, I believe it was a couple nights ago, was got a really huge win to start out the season, and I think that maybe we should start looking a little bit more at the Pac-12 possibly coming out and being a force finally in in the tournament come spring, come March Madness. So keep a lookout for a few of those teams out there. I mean, you did just have Oregon lose to Baylor, like you mentioned. Baylor being part of the Big 12 there. Always the big conference, always a consistent conference, and I always love them for their defensive capabilities. They're always getting these really lanky, tall players that are just knock the stuffing out of everything.
Including
Nonetheless,
Oregon today.
nonetheless, I think that every now and then you'll see a Pac-12 team have an off day, but you won't see it happen often this season.
So we're about to wrap it up here. So I think let's keep it light and simple here. Amari Stoudemire was a guy a few years back, if you remember, who got a lot of trending stuff about his $100 million contract. Is now offering his glasses to referees. Does that just reflect what Amari is without Steve Nash, or is he just a guy that faded away in time?
I'm just trying to figure out what offer up his goggles, because I mean, needless to say, he's not flying anymore. So maybe he's trying to help the refs get the lead out of their behind so they could see the game a little bit better. Um, uh, so this is going to go into another idea, something that I want to discuss later, and I've talked about it off and on when I've been on the show. Injuries are debilitating, but they are also a reflection of the conditioning of the player. Amari Stoudemire is conditioned to do simply one thing: jump vertically. His lateral movement was very limited, and as the injuries started to pile up, lateral movement made his injuries worse. And to say that he went from $100 million player to where he's at now is only a testament of the fact that his productivity has exponentially declined due to how he was conditioned. If 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 he had even the slight fluidity of say a Joel Embiid or a Jaleel Okafor, or even wasn't as as he is now, if he was a little bit slimmer like a Brandon Ingram, I think that he would have recovered a lot better, could have developed a mid-range jump shot, and would have continued to earn that $100 million contract. Unfortunately, it's always a gamble when it comes to contracts and trying to evaluate a player, and that's just what it is. He is a guy that just got injured too badly.
Too badly to recover from. We can keep it on that subject, as Kevin Durant called his former, I don't know what you want to call him, draftee, Greg Oden, a non-bust just because he couldn't play. Was Greg somebody that got the bad end of the stick, or do you think conditioning again is just the reason he got shut down?
And again, and I'm glad you transitioned into that, because there are two sides of this. They call Greg Oden a bust because you put him at the top. He doesn't play like a top. He doesn't yield top player results, and so that in itself, you call the pick itself a bust. And I look at it on the other side, where Kevin Durant is coming from, where injuries have limited the potential of this player. I'm going to have to go with the former. So you see this guy perform, possibly under duress, but his playing where he's at now, injury wise, is a result of how he has been developed, hitting the weights, having all that impact on his knees, et cetera, over the years. He is who he is because of how he's been conditioned. And I don't personally blame him, because he might have been ignorant of the whole thing. He might have been aware of his body's condition at the time, and he played it correct. He played it correctly to try to get those top contracts. But I think that this was a bust. I have to disagree with Kevin Durant, where I think if you are slightly injured, you should kind of play back a little bit, say, hey, I can develop. You just got to give me a little bit more time to let these puppies heal. And trust me, give me about a year or two, and I'm going to be great. Greg Oden all of a sudden is not a number 2 pick.
No, he definitely is not, if he admits to that.
And it's just, I mean, it's there's no other way to call it but that at this point, because Greg Oden has been rumored for years to be coming back fresh, and I have yet to see it. But hey, I mean, Sean Livingston came back from a completely blown out knee and helped. Then he's come back for a ring. I mean, between him and Andre Iguodala, definitely two of the best supporting players on Golden State. It's always possible for Greg Oden. Granted, he is a bigger guy, but until he comes back, or if he comes back, he's a bust.
No, he's a for sure bust. I don't think I can trust KD on that one. If we switch up, mentioning Kevin Durant here, the leading scorer in the NBA through, 10, 9, 11 games, depending on who you look at, is DeMar DeRozan. What's changed for him?
No one's guarding him.
And he's not guarding anybody else, so I guess he's just giving the favor right back to him.
It's basically the James Harden effect. You spend a lot of time on offense, which I believe is a really smart idea for him, given the somewhat paltry performance that he had in the playoffs in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. And looks like we're having some of the same results today versus Cleveland. Sorry to burst that bubble there.
Cleveland they got him down the stretch there.
And that's what it comes to. It's the James Harden effect. You save your energy for the offensive side of the glass. You play help defense a little bit. You pick your punches where you can, but you don't really dedicate to it. And yeah, you're gonna go off and be a leading scorer. Kevin Durant right now is doing what he's doing simply because he's on the Golden State Warriors, and it's him versus Russell Westbrook trying to see who could score more. But for DeRozan to be leading right now, it's nice, but we'll see if it can last throughout the season.
You mentioned Russell Westbrook, so 6-5 Thunder, who have had some legitimate wins against guys like the Clippers. I mean, 1-1 so far, but they took down a tough Clippers team that has only one loss at this point. And then we look at the 6-4 Rockets, who with James Harden have beaten guys like the Spurs already, and who have a rematch against the Spurs coming up pretty quick here.
Mm-hmm.
If they say finish even here, if both of these teams, have the 6-5 or the 5-6 seed in the West here, and both of them continue their play, who's better for you? Who's better for you for, say, an MVP pick, and who's better for you for, say, their team to carry them deep in the playoffs? Harden with the Rockets or Westbrook with the Thunder?
So Harden has basically been through deeper in the playoffs than Russell Westbrook has. Insert second player. So James Harden has been further without Dwight Howard than Russell has been without Kevin Durant. So if history suggests anything, is that James Harden would go further. However, if the writers and the voters for D haven't realized by now that James Harden doesn't play defense and does not deserve the MVP whatsoever, then we need to just go ahead and cancel that vote altogether, because it's been ridiculous that Russell Westbrook time and time again has carried the Thunder on his shoulders while flying 30 feet in the air at Mach 50 into the playoffs year after year after year. I'm giving it to Russell Westbrook right now. Same record. Thunder get in. Russell Westbrook MVP. Definitely further than playoffs than the Rockets.
All right, so if we take a look one seat up from there, we're at the Blazers, who are 7-4. What do you think of Mr. Lillard? Obviously, my opinion is a little swayed there, and if they were to finish in the top three, I think, and he continues his level of play, he would easily get my vote, should I have one. But if the standings were to remain the same here, we say the Thunder are the bottom three seed in the West in terms of playoff standings, so 6, 7, 8, and the Blazers were top three, and you get the same level of production, Lillard and Westbrook. Do you still stick with Westbrook there?
Yeah, I do. And only because of durability. You're basically going to see a shootout. It's probably, I wouldn't be surprised if both players went off for 60.
No, not surprised at all.
But they were like 25 of 42 shooting between them. Blood and buckets of sweat just poured all over both in the Thunder Arena and over in the Rose Garden. I would still give it to the Thunder, simply because they have a few more scrappy players than Portland does, and I almost trust Lillard to a fault, to where you just kind of want to ball just to see how many you can make, but you forget that you have to play this game. Sure, if you can have Russell Westbrook and Damian Lillard go at each other for 7 games straight without one of them breaking first, and I think the first one to break will be Lillard.
Yeah, so I mean, that would take an actual shootout for us to figure out, which I don't know if we'll see out of the West just because of how the seeding goes, but it would be nice to see. We're getting close to closing time here, but one more thing I had for you is in terms of head coaches for teams that we're not so bad maybe 2 or 3 years ago, but are certainly in some trouble now. Who do you think is in more trouble of losing their job? Rick Carlisle with the Mavs, who has been there for ages and ages now, although his team's kind of spiraled out of control with Dirk starting to hit his decline, or a guy like Eric Spoelstra and the Heat, who are absolutely bombing out in Miami?
Spoelstra. Easy.
You think?
Rick Carlisle. Yeah, okay. So for anyone out there that thinks that Rick Carlisle's on some sort of hot seat, he's not on a hot seat. He may be ready to retire with Dirk, or maybe ready to move on and take a back seat or an assistant coaching role with another team, simply because everyone's known that Dallas has been getting close to its last legs. They've just been kind of waiting for it. So this is not so much of a fault of Carlisle's or his lack of coaching. He can still coach. He's definitely good. He could take another team, maybe even a younger team, back into the playoffs. Spoelstra, his only Spoelstra because of the players that he's had and the GM, Pat Riley.
That he has relied on in Mr. Pat Riley. Okay, so before I hand it off to you for closing time here, I do want to take a look across sports, just to Mr. Chris Collinsworth for showing us just how gutsy he can be, starting his little high school Twitter feud with Mr. Bill Simmons there. I think Collinsworth deserves a shout out for that, and I'm sure all of our sideline friends had a good chuckle there at that one. And I think we may actually see Collinsworth on Simmons' show here. So if you thought the debate for Clinton and Trump was bad, you might want to watch out here.
This is probably going to be way more interesting than the past 9.5 months of back and forth, red and blue. And it's interesting that you bring up the politicking part. I wanted to close out this show real quick with a quick piece, something that's been resting on my mind for a little bit. It's so important for us as sports fans, as writers, watchers, so on and so forth, to keep the sport pure of politics. And as much as we want to not talk about politics, we only want to talk about the game. One thing that we need to realize is that politics is part of the life for us as participants in this sport, whether we're players, whether we're writers, whether we're coaches, whether we're part of the staff, the GM, even the owners. Everyone is playing some sort of role in a way that the nation that we live in, that we play the sport in, is shaped. And to simply neglect politics or lack thereof, and if someone within sports makes some sort of political statement or takes a political stance, and to simply neglect that, or to simply complain and say that, oh, we want to keep sports pure, it's somewhat understandable as an old head, but it is also somewhat arrogant and ignorant of all of us to be naive that this world exists around us. In fact, it is part of what shapes our sports today. So for someone to go on and blast, say, for his comments on our new commander in chief, or for someone to go with the hashtag I'm with her when Hillary was still up as a candidate for the president in their Twitter feed, and for someone to say, hey, just go back to doing what you do best, which is play basketball, it's essentially to forget that person, that player, that coach is a person entirely, and that they are one of us. They are also American, and they participate in these politics either by voting or by supporting a candidate, just like the rest of us do. So the next time you go out there and you see a post like that, just keep in mind that we are all people. And I'm sure that a lot of us, as a result of this election, want to keep that in mind going forward with a lot of subjects that are going to be coming up in the future. Make sure to support your player for being a person.
Unless you, well, I would say stand for your cause, but in Kaepernick's case, take a knee or a blindfold to the ballot box. Everybody's a person. Everybody's got a view.
Well, thanks for having me on the show, and that just about wraps it up for today. We will be back in on Friday, I believe. Are we doing this Friday?
Yeah, we should be in Friday or Saturday here.
Hey, gonna be freaking for the weekend. Hey, again, thanks, listeners, for tuning in to this podcast. Appreciate you guys coming in, and go Lakers.